Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to Jen's Books. I hope you're having a fantastic week and it's a bit warmer and drier where you are. It's drizzly and grey and awful here. But what can cheer you up on a miserable day, I hear you ask? Well, this video is going to be an introduction to some dystopian novels that I am recommending to you. So if dystopian's your thing, then maybe that will cheer you up. I've actually got dozens of books to talk about, but in this video I'm only focusing on 8, and so there'll be a series of videos about dystopian novels. And what I'd really like as well is if you've got any suggestions of books that you've read that you think fit into that apocalyptic kind of theme, if you could let me know in the comments. Let me know if you've read any of the books that I'm discussing in this video, and let me know if there's any sort of short stories or poems or anything that you think is going to be of interest based on those recommendations today. So first of all, I wanted to start with the book that started my whole obsession with all things dystopian and end of the world, and that is John Wyndham's The Day of the Triffids. So this is probably a book that doesn't need a whole lot of introduction. It's probably one that you'll be familiar with. There's been several adaptations. For some reason I haven't got it stuck in my head that we had to read this at school. It seems a really odd book choice now for a young adult to read, but I'm pretty sure we read this at school and we watched bits of the 1970s TV adaptation alongside it, which is really strange when I think about it now. What I would say, this book alongside the next one of my recommendations may have some problematic elements to it. They were both written and published in the 1950s, so you have to kind of read it with an element of that in mind. But it's just a really enjoyable book, and if you have read The Day of the Triffids and you know I don't really want to read that again, John Wyndham's actually got loads of other books that are sort of very dystopian. We've got The Chrysalids, we've got The Trouble with Lichen, we've got Chucky. There are loads of books. The Midwich Cuckoos that was in they did an adaptation of that recently, which I saw on the TV. So there's loads of different books that you can dip into if this is one you've read and you know you're not interested in reading again. But for those of you who haven't read The Day of the Triffids, basically this is in a future past world really, because it sort of feels more 1950s than contemporary. They farm these plants called Triffids that they can use for oil. So it's sort of an environmentally friendly oil, it's cheap, and they can be used for lots of different uses. So that's why they're farming these sort of dangerous plants that can actually move and have these tongues that come out and can eat human flesh. So yeah, you know, in the long run, farming corn's probably a bit safer, but that's the world we're living in. And our protagonist is called Bill. He is a scientist, sort of farmer who works on a Triffid farm, and he's attacked by a Triffid and he ends up in hospital all bandaged up. And it just so happens that while he is in hospital, there's this great comet storm one night, sort of like bright green fireworks, and everybody goes out to watch these fireworks and not really sure what it is. But the next day Bill wakes up still in hospital, still bandaged up, and slowly comes to the realization that not everything is as it should be. The doctor hasn't come in to check on him, the nurse hasn't been in with his breakfast, it's very quiet and eerie, there's no sounds from outside, it should be a busy street in London, and none of that is happening. So he actually removes the bandages and goes to explore and discovers that actually everybody who saw the fireworks the night before is now blind, and the Triffids are kind of on the loose. So in the book, he comes across a character called Josella, who's infamous for her feminist writings. He has to rescue her. As I say, that, you know, there's some interesting things to discuss and unpick if you wanted to talk about this in the book club. And on their journey, they also pick up a girl called Susan who has lost her family. And basically, it's about their search as they try and find a new family or a new people that they can work with. And people with sight, like the three central characters, are all in demand, and people who without the sight are trying to find sighted people to look after them in this new world and protect them. So it's a lot about what happens when society breaks down. It's I would say there's a sort of a theme of people thinking they're too clever in terms of science and it coming back, nature coming back to bite them in the butt. But it's a real romp And if you like that sort of classic dystopian novel, then you know, definitely I recommend The Day of the Triffids. It's one of the few ones I've reread quite a few times just for enjoyment value. The second one I wanted to mention is 1956, The Death of Grass, John Christopher. This is one that I'd heard about a while ago and had been meaning to read for some time, then accidentally came across it on my travels in a bookshop in Euston Station in London. And it's again sort of a very sort of similar tale in a way. It's nature out of balance due to mankind. Basically, there's a disease which is affecting all kinds of grasses, and field after field is going brown and dying, and there's a shortage of food, and the situation's getting worse and worse. And what kind of reminded me of this, and I don't want to bring up the you know, the COVID situation of recent years, but there's a sense here of creeping dread. To begin with, it feels like it's something that's happening far away to other people and isn't going to affect the people in the UK, but it eventually hits the country, and the main character, called John, and his friend Roger Buckley and their families set off to try and get out the city and travel to John's brother's farm in Westmoreland, where they think that they'll be safe. They come across lots of difficulties on the way. The government are lying to the people. They're telling everybody that they should stay at home in the cities and that help is coming, but actually Roger and John discover that they're planning on bombing basically the people in the cities to bring the population down so that the food goes around longer. So what I would say is there are some trigger warnings around this. There is a theme of sexual violence at one point. It's not particularly graphic, but it is in there. And obviously, you know, this is about humanity breaking down and the way that our behaviour would change without those structures in place. And if you're a fan of The Day of the Triffids, definitely recommend this. You will enjoy it. It sort of reminds me, like, gives me Day of the Triffid vibes very much. But it's not a very long read, and it's a bit of a classic dystopian, so definitely one worth picking up if you've not read it before. The next one is a bit of a spoiler for my video later in the week, because it's one that I've read for the first time this week. So it's one of my March reads, and it's The Road by Cormac McCarthy. And this was written in 2006. And this is kind of, I mean, it feels quintessential dystopian. If you're interested in dystopian novels, you know, you can't really go wrong with this one, really. It is what it says on the box. It's the story of the man and the boy who remain without names throughout the book. And they're travelling across the country, trying to get to the coast, to get away from cold weather, really, but without any other aim in place. We discover that there was 3 of them originally. The boy's mother was with them, but she's no longer with them. They never unpick what's happened, what's the cause of this disaster that's killed so many people. But they talk about firestorms. They walk through vistas where there are just listed with burnt corpses. At one point they're camping in the woods, and the trees start falling down around them. So there's hints about what's happened, but they never really explain. It's not a topic that the boy and the man discuss. It's about their survival, and as they're slowly starving and trying to find food in a landscape that's already been looted and ravaged. It's very touching emotionally, you know, watching this relationship between the man and the boy, and the way the man kind of tries to hold the boy at arm's length to a certain extent, but they're very much a unit travelling together and completely bonded as they're navigating this you know, this awful vista to try and survive, basically survive in the face of hopelessness. The ending is got some punch to it. Definitely recommend, but as I say, it's a bit of a spoiler because I'm also going to be talking about this in my March reads videos. But it's a classic dystopian novel that I've been meaning to read for ages, and I've got a list of so many dystopian books that I'm working through. Some of that I already had, some I've got on my Kindle, some that I've only just found out about. I went to a conference a couple of weeks ago, and there was a lot of discussion about dystopia and dystopian fiction. So I was writing down the names of all these other books, so I can't wait to share them all with you as I work my way through them. The next one is more of a recent book, and it's called The Wall, and it's by John Lanchester. This is the hardback edition that came out in, I think it was 2019. I think it was longlisted for the Booker, I seem to remember, but this is a really interesting take on the dystopian novel, and it feels so prescient that it makes your skin crawl a little bit. So basically, again, it's a climate change novel due to the effects that humans have had on the environment. The waters have risen, and this has increased the number of refugees and people trying to get to the UK for safety. And as a result of this, basically the UK have built a wall around the entire coastline, and young people have to do military service by being defenders, by defending this wall and stopping people getting into the country. And that's the premise, really. Our main character is starting his 2-year tour, you know, on the wall, and where he meets a love interest called Heifer, and basically if they let anybody in and over the wall, they are then set adrift themselves to become floating refugees. So it's a really it feels really modern, it feels really of the moment, it has all those classic vibes of dystopian fiction, but you know things aren't going to end well from the beginning. But it's just such a unique idea, this idea of the coastline just defended by walls and women and men with guns, you know, keeping the invaders, as they're called, at bay. But I really enjoyed this book. I found it really interesting. I would certainly recommend it if you enjoy dystopian novels and you've not come across this one. As I say, you know, it's about survival, it's about climate, it's about politics, and you know, people losing their freedom, and it raises lots of interesting questions. So I definitely recommend that one too. The next one has had some sort of mixed feedback, really. I really enjoyed it. I found it a bit of a dystopian romp, but not everybody agrees. I was reading a review earlier, but the fact they couldn't even get the name of the protagonist right didn't really fill me with, you know, confidence in their reviewing abilities. But this is The Trees by Ali Shaw, and I think I bought this because of the cover. It's just stunning. I just love that image of the fox. I think it's really, really beautiful, and the bright colours on the black. And Ali Shaw, you might have come across before. She wrote The Girl with the Glass Feet and The Man Who Reigned, so sort of magical realism type of books. And in this book, shock horror, nature is striking back again, as with quite a few dystopian novels. And we have a kind of protagonist in the form of Adrian, who is currently at home. His wife is abroad. She is, you know, working abroad in Ireland, and he's trapped in the city as basically trees, or I saw a description of it as a tree apocalypse, which made me laugh. But the trees are growing overnight and taking over the vista, and so he meets up with a woman called Hannah and her teenage son, and along their journey they meet up with other people on the way, and basically they're trying to you know, get to his wife, trying to find out what's happening. There's real fairy tale vibes here as well, and if you've read Ali Shaw before, you'll be aware of that kind of theme in her work. There's a touch of magic realism, there's a touch of the supernatural. The ending wasn't my favourite part of the book, but I found this a really enjoyable romp. So if you want to read something a bit different, again, it's people out on the road trying to find safety, but it's the trees, it's nature themselves that is literally fighting back. And yeah, I did enjoy that one, and would recommend. The next book I wanted to introduce you to is The Last by Hannah Jameson, and this was published in 2019 as well. So again, quite a recent book, and it's very much a dystopian novel, but it does take the dystopian novel in a different direction, really. So we have John, who's our protagonist. He's a historical academic. He's in Switzerland at the time that all of this takes place. He's staying in a hotel that's kind of in the middle of nowhere, and while he's there, suddenly the world comes to an end, kind of literally. They discover that nuclear bombs have been dropped on major cities across the globe, and he doesn't know whether his family back in the States have survived. He doesn't know whether they're alive or dead, or what's going on. And a lot of the people flee the hotel immediately to try and get back to loved ones. But John stays in the hotel with another 19 guests, with the sort of feeling that, you know, someone at some point is going to come and find them and come and rescue them and tell them what's going on. And in the meantime, they've got amenities there, they've got food, they've got water, so they're quite safe. So they stay in this hotel, and what makes this a different take on the typical dystopian novel is that they then one day find the body of a young girl in the water tank of the hotel. So it becomes like a murder mystery as well. And John starts to look into who may have killed this girl, as all of this is taking place, and they've lost contact with everybody outside of the hotel. So it's an interesting take. I'm not sure if I enjoyed it as much as some of the other books that I've mentioned, but I would definitely recommend it. I did enjoy it. As I say, it brought something new to the dystopian novel. You know, they have to go out and do raids to try and get food, so there's that sort of thing that's quite familiar if you've seen any of the sort of recent series on TV. But the fact that we have this murder mystery at the heart of it as well makes it a sort of a unique take, and I would definitely recommend that one. My final recommendation, or my near to final recommendation, is actually 3 recommendations. I've only got one of them with me today, which is Margaret Atwood, The Year of the Flood, but actually I wanted to talk about the Mad Adam Trilogy, of which this is the central book. So there are 3 books in the trilogy. The first one is Oryx and Crake, which I absolutely loved. That came out in 2003. Then this is the sandwich in the jam in the sandwich, The Year of the Flood, which came out in 2009, and then we have the Mad Adam book, which came out in 2013 and sort of finished off the series. The mistake I made is I read the first 2 in quite close succession, and then by the time Mad Adam came out, I couldn't really remember what had happened. All I knew is I'd really enjoyed the first 2, but because all the books are linked, it's worth reading them together. So I reread them all during COVID. I don't want to bring up COVID again, but this is a dystopian video and we are talking about dystopian landscapes, so it kind of feels fitting in a way. But I reread the first 2 books, and then I read the 3rd book, Mad Adam, all in one go, and really, really loved them. So this is kind of an alternative future where genetic modification is very normal. They're genetically modifying animals for food and for all sorts of other reasons. And we begin to be introduced by this character called Snowman, who is living on a beach. For all he knows, he's the last human being on the planet. And the present day is sort of interspersed with flashbacks that go all the way back to his childhood, where he meets Crake, who he's in mourning for, is his best friend, his childhood friend, and also Oryx, who is the woman that they both fell in love with. So there's sort of a love triangle going on as well between them. And it's really engaging straight from the beginning. It's very accessible. The second book introduces us to completely different characters, although as the book goes on, you know, we find there's a crossover. And they are God's gardeners, and they're kind of a sect that are planning and preparing for the end of the world. And they have farms, urban farms across the city. So we were introduced to Wren and Toby, who are 2 female characters who are central to that particular book. And the end of Oryx and Crake leads the Snowman hearing that there are other people, and he goes in search of them. And that's where we kind of pick up the novel, or pick up the story in Mad Adam. It takes us back to Snowman, or otherwise known as Jimmy, as he meets these people who are actually related to the second book. So they're all connected, but I found it a really ambitious, sort of epic book. Loads of twists and turns, lots of scientific sort of ideas as well. We do find out as the book goes on that there's been an epidemic, and that is what has created this issue with the apocalypse and the reduction of people, and the fact that they're now at threat to of these sort of genetically modified animals that are roaming around them. But I really enjoyed those books. So if you're new to Margaret Atwood, they're quite different from quite a lot of her older books, but I would definitely recommend them. Really enjoyed them. If you have read Margaret Atwood before but you've not read these books, again, you'll love them. They're just great, and they're, you know, really proper chunky meaty books, and worth having a go with if you want to get caught into a completely different world over the span of 3 thick chunky books. The final book I wanted to introduce you to was Blindness by Jose Saramago. This was published in Portuguese in 1995 and then translated into English by Giovanni Patrioro in 1997. So this is a really interesting book as well. Again, a slightly different take, although you might feel some Dave the Triffids vibes in this one as well. Basically, our central character is an he looks at eyes. He's an eye doctor, and they discover that loads of people simultaneously go blind in this city, and it's all about how they survive. Initially, the government puts all of these people into kind of an asylum, into a quarantine to stop the condition from spreading, and it's about the characters' engagement in that. But eventually they get outside of the asylum, and it's them sort of trying to renegotiate this new world. But then just as well, actually, no, I'm not going to give you spoilers, but definitely recommend this one as well as a sort of a similar take, but definitely bringing something new to it, through the engagement of these different characters that are well fleshed out and interesting. But again, it's that idea of the social breakdown in society. So I'm hoping that those 8, or if you want to be specific, 10 books give you something to get started on in terms of dystopian fiction. But I will be producing more of these videos. As I say, I've got so many books, so many dystopian books to read. But if you have recommendations of where I should start and what I should prioritise with, do put them in the comments. If you're interested in finding out more about dystopian fiction and getting some more recommendations, or just generally following me in my journey, then do like and subscribe to Jen's Books, and I look forward to having you along for the ride. But in the meantime, have a great week, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.